November 1920. 16-hour shifts. One child worker collapses in the dust. In a factory where the owner chained the doors shut, survival wasn't a right, it was a battle fought with bare hands and iron tools. Nobody talks about this struggle in detail because the powerful erase the costs of their profits from history books. But we will reveal the silent code of conduct among workers, and the moment a shared look of rage replaced fear, forcing an impossible choice: work until death or fight for life. The Industrial Revolution had a hidden war. You are about to discover the final, desperate victory of the forgotten. But first, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Imagine waking up at 4 a.m., not because of the sun, but due to the acrid smell of soot and coal that permeates even your deepest dreams. We are in 1920, and the industrial city roars like a hungry beast, ready to swallow men, women, and children into sick. You enter the factory in darkness and leave in darkness, live in entire days without seeing the color of the sky, surrounded by stale, humid, and hot air that turns the lungs of healthy youths into decrepit old men before they even hit 30. There was no romance inside those red brick walls. It was an environment of pure survival, where the noise of transmission belts was so deafening that workers had to learn to read lips just to communicate. With no locker rooms, no sanitation, and breaks that barely allowed time to swallow a piece of dry bread, life there was worth less than the machinery. If you lost an arm and a gear, there was a line of unemployed men waiting at the gate to take your post, for the same miserable wage that barely covered the rent of a tenement. But on that specific November morning, the usual brutal routine carried a different kind of tension, something that made the hair on the back of your neck stand up even in the suffocating heat of the warehouse. The foreman, a man known for his cruelty, was strangely silent, pacing the aisles and staring intently at the faces of DOS youngest workers. His gaze suggested he wasn't looking for sabotage. He was calculating exactly how close everyone was to the ultimate, inevitable breaking point. In the cramped aisles, you'd see entire families operating the looms. Fathers, mothers, and even 6-year-olds engaging in what they called nimble finger work, reaching into dangerous machinery where adult hands couldn't fit. It sounds insane today, but back then, that extra few cents meant the difference between starvation and survival. There was a grim solidarity among us. We shared silent nods and half-broken cigarettes, united by the constant threat of the pink slip that meant instant destitution without a second thought from the owners. The physical danger was constant, but the deeper threat was the creeping sickness. Everyone was sick. Old Miller, a veteran who had survived the 1918 flu and 2 factory fires, whispered that half the crew on the first floor was burning up with fever. Yet they were forced to work to meet the endless quota. The bosses didn't care about contagion. They only worried about production lines. This shared illness created a bond deeper than friendship, transforming the noise of the machines into a shared, collective, rattling cough. Lunch break was a joke, 15 minutes huddled on the dirty floor, eating cold potatoes with grease-stained hands because there were no break rooms or sanitary areas to speak of. But that day, the conversation wasn't about the poor food or the ache in our bones. It was about the pervasive illness. Just as the whistle blew to end our brief respite, a sudden, sharp, wet-hacking cough pierced the air, louder than any whistle, signaling that the brutal routine was about to explode into a devastating crisis of life and death. The real mystery in 1920 was how the human body could endure such a sustained assault. It wasn't a strange machine, but the simple, horrifying equation of 18 hours of forced labor against 3 hours of sleep, fueled by insufficient, poor food. The exhaustion was so profound, it became a delirium, making the workers hallucinate the screeching gears as whispering voices and the dark soot on the walls as moving shadows. The foreman knew this. He used this state of near collapse to push them harder, knowing they were too tired to argue. But the most insidious killer wasn't exhaustion. It was the air. The chemical residue, the cotton dust, and the coal smoke created a lethal cocktail that brought chronic illness to everyone, especially the youngest. Young Thomas, who had been working since dawn, was bent over his loom, his tiny body racked by a wet, hacking cough that seemed to tear his lungs apart. His eyes were wide and red, yet he kept working, terrified that stopping for even a moment would mean his entire family would lose their weekly ration. Suddenly, the deafening rhythm of the spinning department was broken by a sickening, wet thud. Thomas, unable to breathe or stand any longer, finally collapsed, his head hitting the unforgiving concrete floor just inches from the fast-moving transmission belts. The closest worker screamed, and the entire section, momentarily freed from the hypnotic noise, froze. It wasn't the machinery that stopped, but the terror that a child's life, worth less than the cost of a replacement belt, had just been extinguished due to sheer neglect. The foreman, Mr. Finch, arrived not with panic, but with a cold, almost surgical fury. And now you'd better subscribe to the channel before it gets mad at you too. Have you subscribed yet? Then let's go. He didn't check Thomas's pulse or call for aid. He simply roared over the still-running machinery. Get him off the line, and back to work. Clean up this mess, and document it as worker negligence. This immediate, callous command was the breaking point. It wasn't an accident anymore. It was an execution by exhaustion. A final, brutal confirmation that their bodies were disposable tools, hastily replaced by the starving crowd waiting outside the gates. This time, the workers didn't just exchange silent, fearful glances. They shared a look of cold, incandescent rage. Old Elias, who had seen too many good men die from the dust, did the unthinkable. He dropped his tools. The sound of metal clanging on concrete was deafening in the suddenly quiet corner, a sound louder than any steam engine. It was the spark of collective rebellion, the moment they realized they could fight back by refusing to work, by forming the first quiet, terrifying seed of a union. Finch knew that sound. He saw the shift in their eyes, that dangerous solidarity that could halt his entire line and cost the company thousands. Before a single worker could move toward the main gate for a walk out of strike that would demand safety, Finch rushed to the entrance and, with a heavy, sickening clang, locked the reinforced doors from the inside, dropping the heavy chains. They were trapped, not by a mysterious machine, but by the oldest rule of survival. The only way out was through the fight. The lock's metallic clank was the spark that ignited the powder keg of 16 hours of daily abuse. When the workers turned, they weren't scrambling for safety. They moved as a single, deliberate wave toward Mr. Finch, demanding the doors be unchained and Thomas's body be treated with dignity. Elias, clutching the heavy sledgehammer usually used to fix the cauldrons, stood at the front, his eyes red not from the factory dust, but from the cold fire of overdue justice. It wasn't just a confrontation over hours. It was a battle for the very soul of the working class in America. Finch, realizing his desperate move to prevent a strike had turned the factory into a cage match, didn't back down. He snatched a heavy, iron pipe kept beneath his desk, a crude but lethal weapon common in industrial disputes, and leveled it at the approaching mass. The air crackled with a tension thicker than the factory soot, the silence broken only by the worry of the distant transmission belts. As Finch lunged forward, Elias swung the sledgehammer, not at the man, but with terrifying precision, smashing the heavy chain securing the door in a single, deafening blow. The doors burst open, and the sight was unlike any other arus of cold, clean November air meeting the toxic heat and rage of the factory floor. They flooded out, not in panic or disarray, but in an organized line of defiance that spilled into the street, leaving the deafening machinery to run itself in the darkness. The company reported the event as a riot caused by radicals and denied all claims of negligence. But on the cold cobblestones outside, the Aperios knew they had finally won something more valuable than a day's wage, the first small victory in the long war for survival. Now, the biggest victory for me will be your like and your subscription to the channel. Subscribe now. The story of 1920 is a raw portrait of the industrial frontier. While the majority of factories did adhere to basic human decency, and some pioneering companies even offered better wages and working hours, the workers you watched had the misfortune of working for those who saw their humanity as a disposable cost. Their desperate fight was against the minority of management that pushed the limits beyond all acceptable ethics. Their courage, resulting from the cruelty of those specific employers who violated all standards, wasn't just for a better wage. It was a necessary battle for the establishment of any limit at all. Want to know what doesn't need limits? It's the number of comments and likes you can give. It is their resilience against the most ruthless exploitation that ultimately led to the safety standards we benefit from today. The core lesson is clear. Progress demands decency. Now, leave your opinion in the comments. Do you know of any stories that have been forgotten? And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications, because history is rarely black and white.